In July 2026, the price of instant coffee rose 15.8%. Shelf-stable fish and seafood rose 6.1%, while rice prices were 6.2% higher than 1 year earlier. But what is more notable is what sits behind those numbers. USDA now forecasts U.S. rice production at the lowest level in 33 years. Total wheat supplies down about 13%, while contracted processing tomato production in California is also forecast to decline significantly. This does not mean grocery stores will be empty after August 31st, but it shows one thing very clearly. Some familiar staples are heading into fall with higher prices, tighter supply, or greater preparedness value than many people think. So today, we are going through 12 foods worth adding before August ends. And the final items come with some especially notable numbers. 12. Iodized salt. It may be the cheapest item on the list, but it is also one of the easiest things to forget. A box of salt can sit in the kitchen all year, and you almost never think about it. Because it is so familiar, many people build an emergency pantry with rice, beans, oatmeal, and canned meat, but miss the small thing that helps both nutrition and flavor work better. The first is sodium and iodine. Sodium is a mineral the body needs for many normal functions, while iodine is needed for the body to produce thyroid hormones. In a situation after a storm or a power outage, the role of sodium becomes even easier to see. If you have to clean up, carry water, or work outside in hot weather for many hours, the body loses salt and electrolytes through sweat. OSHA notes that prolonged work in high temperatures can cause electrolyte loss and contribute to heat cramps. That is when salt is no longer just about whether food tastes good or not. The second is seasoning. A pantry full of rice, beans, oatmeal, and canned meat can still become monotonous if everything is bland. Just the right amount of salt can make simple foods easier to eat. Sometimes the distance between edible and I want to eat this again tomorrow comes down to seasoning. In 2026, BLS said the category salt and other seasonings and spices in July rose 4% compared with the same period 1 year earlier. This is the increase for the whole category, not table salt alone. But price is not the only reason to buy early. Salt is not in shortage across the United States. Before a major storm, cheap and easy-to-store items can still disappear locally from shelves when many households buy at the same time over a short period. As for shelf life, salt itself is very stable when kept dry. With iodized salt, iodine can gradually decline over time. Morton recommends iodized salt be used within about 5 years for best quality. NIH also notes that iodine declines faster if salt is kept in a hot and humid environment. The biggest enemy of salt in the pantry is not time, but moisture. Keep it in a cool, dry place, in its packaging or in an airtight container. You do not need to turn your pantry into a salt warehouse. A few small boxes, kept dry and rotated periodically, are enough for most households. The paradox of salt is right there. It is so cheap that almost no one thinks they need to prepare for it. But without it, both nutrition and the simplest pantry meals lose part of their value. 11. Pure honey. If you only see honey as a bottle of something sweet to drizzle on toast, you are missing the most notable part of it in 2026. The latest numbers from USDA show that domestic production and the amount of honey held in producer stocks have just gone through a year of fairly sharp decline. In 2025, the U.S. produced about 116 million pounds of honey, down 14% from the year before. Producer-held stocks on December 15th were about 34.8 million pounds, down 15%. Meanwhile, the average honey price recorded by USDA rose to $3.05 per pound, 27% higher than in 2024. Those three numbers tell a fairly clear story. Production fell, stocks fell, and the average price rose sharply. That does not mean honey is scarce at grocery stores across the United States, but it is enough to turn a very familiar pantry food into something worth watching, instead of assuming that the price and supply conditions behind it will always be as favorable as before. And honey is not just a market story. Its standout use is providing quick carbohydrates while also serving as an extremely flexible sweetener. A spoonful of honey can add carbohydrates very simply to a meal made only from basic staples. You can add it to oatmeal, use it with toast, mix it into drinks, or combine it with peanut butter. In a pantry where many foods can become repetitive, just a little honey can change the flavor in a meaningful way. One reason honey is especially useful for storage is its low moisture and very high natural sugar concentration, which create an environment that is unfavorable for many spoilage microorganisms. When sealed tightly and protected from water or contaminants, it can maintain quality for a very long time. And there is one thing many people often misunderstand. Crystallized honey does not mean the honey has gone bad. Crystallization is a natural process when glucose forms crystals. If that happens, gently warming the bottle of honey can usually help the crystals dissolve again. As for storage, the National Honey Board recommends keeping honey in a sealed bottle or container at room temperature, around 64 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit. A place that is too cold makes honey crystallize faster, while prolonged high temperatures can darken it and change its flavor. You also do not need to buy an entire case. A few bottles kept sealed and rotated regularly are far more realistic. What makes honey notable in 2026 is not only its long storage ability. Domestic production and producer stocks are both lower, while the average price is clearly higher. And in the pantry, a bottle of honey still does very simple things well. Adds carbohydrates, adds flavor, and keeps for a long time without needing a refrigerator. 10. Peanut butter. The power has been out for 8 hours. You do not want to open the refrigerator one more time, because every bit of cold air inside is worth keeping right now. The stove is not working. Boiling water is no longer as simple as it is on a normal day. Then someone in the house asks, "What are we eating now?" This is exactly when a jar of peanut butter starts to have value. No heat needed, no water needed, no complicated preparation needed. Just open the lid. In a few spoonfuls of peanut butter, you already have calories, fat, and protein. So one small product can help create a fairly realistic meal when the normal appliances in the kitchen can no longer be used. You can spread it on bread, eat it with crackers, or simply take a few spoonfuls straight from the jar when choices are very limited. This is not just a survival idea on the internet either. Ready.gov directly lists peanut butter among the foods suitable for an emergency food supply. What is interesting in 2026 is that its price is still relatively calm. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, in July, peanut butter prices were only about 1.8% higher than the same period 1 year earlier. And that creates a very different kind of stockpile logic from honey in the previous spot. You do not necessarily have to wait until an item rises sharply in price before you start paying attention to it. Sometimes the more reasonable choice is to add a food your family already uses while the price is still relatively stable, especially when that item solves a very specific situation in an emergency. Peanut butter is also better suited to rotation than to buying and forgetting. USDA gives a range of about 6 to 9 months for unopened commercial peanut butter, and about 2 to 3 months after opening to maintain good quality. With natural peanut butter, read the label instructions carefully because some products recommend refrigeration after opening. The simplest way is to use the older jar first, then add the new jar behind it. And going back to the kitchen, with no power at the beginning. You do not need to rebuild a normal dinner. Sometimes you only need to open a jar, take out bread or crackers, and put food on the table. Peanut butter solves the meal when the kitchen stops working. The next item solves a different problem. What happens when the refrigerator can no longer protect a type of food that many families still use every day? 9. Powdered milk. A gallon of fresh milk is nothing to worry about when the refrigerator is still running normally. But when the power is out long enough, the clock starts ticking. From that moment on, fresh milk becomes one of the foods you have to keep an eye on. Powdered milk is different. Powdered milk does not have that clock before it is mixed. That is the most important reason it belongs in an emergency pantry. Refrigeration independence. You still have a form of dairy sitting on the shelf without needing to take up space in the refrigerator until you actually want to use it. And this year, that advantage is a little more worth noticing. In July 2026, the Bureau of Labor Statistics showed that milk was 5.1% higher than 1 year earlier, while fresh whole milk was 6.0% higher. This is not proof of a dairy shortage. It simply makes a shelf-stable option more worth considering. But powdered milk does not only replace a gallon of milk. It also keeps a very different nutrition group than staples like rice or pasta. Non-fat dry milk provides protein, calcium, and vitamins A and D, while milk and dairy foods in general are also a source of vitamin B12. So it does not do the same job as peanut butter. Peanut butter leans toward calories, fat, and a quick meal. Powdered milk helps keep part of dairy nutrition in the pantry, and you do not need to turn it into a glass of milk every time you use it. Added to oatmeal, it adds more protein and calcium. Added to mashed potatoes, it creates more body. In baking, it helps dry ingredients in the pantry become a more complete item without needing to keep fresh milk in the refrigerator. There is one detail worth knowing when choosing what to buy. If the main goal is pantry storage, non-fat dry milk usually has an advantage over whole milk powder, because the lower fat content helps it stay stable longer during storage. And this is also where you should be careful with the claim. Powdered milk lasts 20 years. Real shelf life depends a lot on packaging and temperature. In hot conditions, quality can decline after only a few months. In a cooler environment with suitable packaging, non-fat dry milk can maintain quality for about 3 to 5 years. So read the date and instructions on the actual product you buy, instead of treating every kind of powdered milk as the same. But powdered milk still has one very important limitation. It solves the refrigerator problem before mixing. It does not solve clean water. You still need safe water to reconstitute it. And once the powder has been mixed into milk, the shelf-stable advantage is basically over. The rest needs to be kept cold, just like regular milk. That is the difference between the two items sitting next to each other. Peanut butter helps you eat immediately when the kitchen is not working. Powdered milk helps part of the dairy in the household not disappear from the pantry just because the refrigerator is no longer reliable. 8. Cooking oil. One of the easiest gaps to overlook in an emergency food pantry is fat. Many people focus on the number of bags of rice, the number of cans of meat, or the pounds of beans sitting on the shelf. But having a lot of food does not mean the amount of energy in that food is high enough. That is why cooking oil belongs on this list. Fat provides about 9 calories per gram, while carbohydrates and protein provide only about 4 calories per gram. There is no need to turn this into a nutrition lecture. Just look at a bowl of rice. Adding 1 spoonful of cooking oil does not make the bowl of rice much bigger. The amount of food in front of you barely changes, but the total calories of the meal can increase quite noticeably. That is the standout value of cooking oil. High energy density. A relatively small amount of oil can help basic foods like rice, beans, noodles, or potatoes provide more energy without you needing to eat a much larger amount of food. Cooking oil is also necessary for cooking and helps the body absorb fat-soluble vitamins like vitamins A, D, E, and K. But in an emergency food pantry, the most notable point is still its ability to hold quite a lot of energy in a small volume. And the 2026 story goes in a fairly unexpected direction. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, in July 2026, the fats and oils category fell about 1.5% compared with the same period 1 year earlier. If every item in this video were described as rising sharply in price, you would have every right to be skeptical. Cooking oil is not. According to current data, this category is moving against the price increase trend of many other foods. Cooking oil also needs to be stored properly. Fat can turn rancid over time, especially when exposed for long periods to heat, light, and air. 7. Canned beans. Dry beans look almost like the perfect storage food at first glance. Cheap, long-lasting, has protein. But in an emergency situation, the cost of a food is not only measured by the money you spend at the store. It is also measured by the water, fuel, and time needed to turn that food into a meal. And that is when canned beans start to have an advantage. Dry beans usually need soaking, extra water, and enough cooking time before they can be eaten. On a normal day, that is not a big deal. But when water is limited or fuel has to be used carefully, the calculation changes. A pound of dry beans is still sitting in the bag. A can of beans has already been cooked. Open the lid, and you can use it right away. No need to add water for soaking. No need to maintain heat for a long time just to bring food from a dry state to an edible state. Even the liquid in the can does not necessarily have to be thrown away. Depending on the dish and the sodium content, it can be used in soup or stew. That is the core advantage of this item: resource efficiency. A cheaper item on the shelf is not necessarily cheaper in an emergency if it requires more water, fuel, and time to prepare. Nutritionally, canned beans still provide protein, fiber, iron, and potassium. More importantly, most of the preparation work has already been done by the manufacturer for you. July 2026. Data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that the canned vegetables category rose about 3.2% from 1 year earlier. This is data for the entire category, not canned beans alone. But with this item, the more notable calculation sits beyond the price tag. A can of beans does not only save cooking work. When resources are limited, it also helps save water, fuel, and time. 3 things that can sometimes be more valuable than the few cents you save when buying dry beans. 6. Canned tomatoes. Imagine you still have enough food for 3 weeks. The food supply is still full. But after many days, every time you open the door, you almost already know what tonight's dinner is going to feel like. That is when a problem that gets talked about less begins to appear. Fatigue from eating the same things over and over. In a prolonged situation, having enough food is only half the story. The other part is whether those meals still make you want to sit down and eat. Canned tomatoes have a very specific role here. They bring acidity, moisture, color, and depth of flavor into a dish. Just 1 can of tomatoes can completely change the shape of a familiar meal. Beans can become a stew with a richer sauce. Pasta can go with tomato sauce. Rice and canned chicken can become a meal that is more moist, has color, and has some sauce instead of just ingredients sitting next to each other. Tomatoes do not just add to the meal. They help change the identity of the meal. And in 2026, behind this very familiar item, there is also a notable production story. USDA said California processors at the beginning of the year expected to contract about 9.8 million short tons of processing tomatoes, about 11% lower than the previous contracted forecast. Contracted acreage for 2026 was forecast at about 185,000 acres, 10% lower than the 205,000 acres in the August 2025 forecast. This is a forecast about raw product for processing, not a forecast that cans of tomatoes will disappear from stores. But it shows the industry entering 2026 with significantly lower contracted production. And there is one very memorable detail when storing this item. USDA places tomatoes in the group of high-acid canned foods and says they usually keep their best quality for about 18 months. So this is not an item you should buy and then push to the back of the food supply for many years. The rule is very simple: first in, first out. Put the older cans in front and the newer cans in back. At the same time, throw away cans that are bulging, leaking, or badly dented. The value of canned tomatoes is not in the food supply having one more can. It is in the fact that the same ingredients from yesterday may no longer feel like the exact same meal from yesterday. 5. Canned chicken. A pack of raw chicken and a can of canned chicken can both become a protein source for dinner. But before they get onto the plate, the amount of work left is completely different. Raw chicken still needs to be handled carefully, protected from cross-contamination, and cooked completely before eating. With commercially canned chicken, the hardest part has already been done before the can reaches your food supply. The meat has already been cooked. That is the specific value of this item. You do not have to start a meal by handling raw poultry when time, water, or the ability to cook is limited. And this is not a story about a chicken shortage either. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, in July 2026, chicken prices were about 2.7% lower than 1 year earlier, while fresh whole chicken was about 3.2% lower. The reason canned chicken is here lies in the work that has already been completed. Inside the can is a source of complete protein that can be added to a meal with very little preparation. One can go straight into a sandwich or flatbread. It can be scattered over rice, or added to soup near the end of cooking to add protein without having to start from raw meat. This is the kind of convenience that is especially valuable in a situation where the kitchen can still be used, but you want to save time, water, or fuel for other things. As for shelf life, USDA says low-acid canned meats and poultry usually keep their best quality for about 2 to 5 years if the can is intact and stored properly. After opening, the remaining portion needs to be refrigerated and should be used within about 3 to 4 days. So this item does not need a shortage story to prove its value. A can of chicken is not worth having in storage only because it contains protein. The real value is that the step of turning raw meat into a usable protein source has already been completed before you need it. 4. Dry pasta. The pasta shelf in the supermarket does not need to be empty for the wheat market in 2026 to be worth paying attention to. There is currently no basis for saying dry pasta is in shortage. But what is happening with the raw material behind it is worth watching. On August 14th, USDA forecast all wheat production in the U.S. at about 1.531 billion bushels, the lowest since the 1970-1971 marketing year. Total wheat supplies are also forecast to fall about 13% compared with the previous year. What is more notable for pasta is that USDA also lowered its forecast for durum wheat, the type of wheat closely tied to semolina flour used in many kinds of dry pasta. Durum acreage in 2026 is also estimated to be significantly lower than the year before. This does not mean the entire decline in wheat will pass straight through into higher pasta prices, but it shows that the raw material base in the U.S. is entering a significantly tighter period. At the consumer level, the Bureau of Labor Statistics said that in July, the rice, pasta, and cornmeal category rose about 3.9% compared with the same period 1 year earlier. This is the increase for the whole category, not dry pasta alone. Pasta still keeps the very ordinary advantages that make it easy to keep in a food supply. The price is usually not high. Families are already used to using it, and rotation happens almost naturally through normal meals. It is also easy to combine with a protein source or a sauce you already have. But in an emergency situation, there is another advantage worth noticing. Cooking time can also become a calculation about fuel. On a normal day, the difference between 10 minutes and 45 minutes is only waiting time. When gas, propane, or backup electricity is limited, that gap becomes real energy that has to be spent. That is why pasta types that cook quickly can have more practical value than you might think. If the goal is long-term storage, simple dry pastas made from semolina are usually more suitable than kinds with added eggs or higher fat content, because fat reduces stability over time. Dry pasta is notable not because shelves are empty today. It is notable because a cheap and familiar food is moving through 2026 with U.S. wheat production at a historic low and total supplies significantly lower than the year before. 3. Instant coffee. Some people can handle a morning with no power. They just do not want to handle it before coffee. Coffee is clearly not water, medicine, or a food you need to survive. But preparing for an emergency is not only about counting calories. Sometimes, keeping a familiar habit also helps an unusual day feel a little less chaotic. And in 2026, that habit is becoming noticeably more expensive. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, in July, coffee prices overall were 3% higher than 1 year earlier. Roasted coffee rose 9.4%. But the most standout number is in this item itself. Instant coffee rose 15.8% in just 1 year. That is a large enough increase to make a product that is usually small in the food supply much more worth noticing. So why instant coffee instead of whole bean coffee? The answer is in the number of steps you can skip. No grinder needed, no coffee maker needed, no filter or complicated brewing system needed. You only need coffee and water. Hot water gives the most familiar experience, but instant coffee can still be mixed with cold water or room temperature water. It just dissolves more slowly, and the flavor will be different. Another advantage is that it takes up very little space. You can control the amount used each time, and, if your household already drinks coffee every day, rotation happens almost naturally. It is not the kind of emergency food you buy and then discover 5 years later still sitting untouched in the corner of the cabinet. When storing it, keep the coffee tightly sealed and away from moisture, heat, and air, because these are the factors that make quality and aroma decline faster. For shelf life, prioritize the best quality date on the actual product and rotate it according to your normal drinking habit. But the most specific value of this item is still a sense of normal. You do not need coffee to live. And precisely because we are not pretending it is a survival necessity, the reason to keep a little in storage becomes even more practical. A familiar cup can sometimes help an unusual morning start more like a normal day. Coffee keeps one part of the familiar morning. But the final two items solve a much more basic need: how to maintain protein and energy when both prices and supply start becoming worth noticing. 2. Canned tuna and canned salmon. A food supply can contain plenty of starch sources, but at some point, the question changes from, what is there left to eat? To, where is the protein? This is when canned fish becomes worth paying attention to. A seafood protein source that can sit ready in the food supply, And in 2026, both prices and the supply story behind some types are making this category worth watching more closely. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, in July 2026, fish and seafood prices rose 7.0% compared with 1 year earlier. The processed fish and seafood category rose 6.4%. In particular, the shelf-stable fish and seafood category, the closest to the cans and pouches sitting in the food supply, rose 6.1%. But tuna and salmon do not have the same story. With salmon, Alaska is the part to pay attention to. In 2025, commercial salmon harvests in Alaska reached about 197.4 million fish. Before the 2026 fishing season, the Alaska Department of Fish and Game forecast a total harvest of about 125.5 million fish, significantly lower than the year before. Much of that gap comes from pink salmon, with a forecast sharply lower than 2025 production. But this needs to be said precisely. 125.5 million fish is still a preseason forecast, not the final harvest result for 2026. Current in-season data also shows that conditions can vary from one region to another. Tuna is different. Tuna should not be tied to the Alaska story. Its role is more practical, providing seafood protein in a compact form, easy to portion out, and, depending on the type and brand, often with lower budget options than canned salmon. Nutritionally, both provide protein. Tuna is often a fairly lean protein choice. Salmon, besides protein, also provides omega-3 fats, giving it a different nutrition profile without turning this section into a health lecture. But here another issue appears. Shelf-stable protein sources still often belong to the more expensive group of foods, compared with basic pantry ingredients. So the final question is not, how many more cans of fish should you buy? But, how can each can of protein go further? And that is exactly why the item in the number 1 spot matters so much. 1. White rice. A can of salmon or canned chicken can provide very useful protein. But a food supply does not work by giving each person 1 can of protein and calling that dinner. You need something that can stretch the value of those foods further. That is why white rice is in the number 1 spot. Rice does not only provide energy, it works as a value multiplier for the entire food supply. And in 2026, the market story behind it is especially worth noticing. In the August 14th update, USDA raised its forecast for U.S. rice production in the 2026-2027 marketing year to 158.4 million U.S. hundredweight. But that number is still at the lowest level in 33 years. Total supplies are forecast at about 262 million units, down 14% from the year before. Ending stocks are only about 36 million units, down 33% and the lowest level in 4 years. USDA also forecasts the average farm price at about $14.90 per unit, up from $12.50 in the previous marketing year. Pressure has also appeared at the retail counter. In July 2026, the Bureau of Labor Statistics said rice prices rose 6.2% compared with the same period 1 year earlier. But those numbers only explain why rice is worth paying attention to right now. The reason it stands at number 1 is in the kitchen. Rice combines with beans to stretch a plant protein source. It combines with chicken to divide animal protein across more servings. A small amount of tuna or salmon can be spread through the whole meal instead of becoming the entire meal. Add tomatoes, and the meal has different moisture and structure. Add a little oil, and the energy density rises again. This is why rice should be seen as a value-multiplying food, not just a cheap starch source. However, rice is not perfect. It needs clean water and heat to cook. So rice truly deserves the number 1 spot only when your food supply has also accounted for water and a backup cooking option. The value of rice is not in the idea that one bag of rice can feed the whole family by itself. It is in its ability to help almost everything you prepared before it go further, create more servings, and work like a system instead of separate foods standing alone. In the end, a good food supply is not measured by how many cans you have, how many bags you have, or how many shelves you can fill. It is measured by the ability to work as a system. You need a source of energy dense enough. You need protein that can be used under different conditions. You need foods that reduce dependence on the refrigerator, fuel, or preparation time. You need a few ingredients that help meals still feel familiar. And most importantly, you need basic items that can stretch the value of more expensive foods across multiple meals. 2026 is showing one thing fairly clearly. Not every item is rising in price, and not every shelf is about to be empty. So this is not a call to panic buy. Good preparation is seeing the weak points in your kitchen before an emergency forces you to discover them the hardest way.